a disclaimer up front. I'm going to do this in a very short period of time. So this is a Coles Notes version of the idea of leadership and coaching. So I want to start by saying that employees leave managers, not organizations. And you know, the truth is that when I come to work for an organization, I work for a manager or a leader, and it's you that impacts my day-to-day. You impact my increases, the job I get to do, how I get to do it, how I come and go. So it's important to know, so what does it take to be a good manager and a leader? So the 10 most frequently cited skills of effective managers are communication and managing time and stress. There are many others, but I've highlighted the top 2 because I personally think they are the most important. So let's talk about communication first. Are you thinking like a communicator? If you look at this rowing that's going on, in order for that to be as effective as it is, in order to have everybody going in the same way at the same time, effective communication is going to be critical. What's important when I think about communication is in this Coles Notes version is the words we use. So the words that you choose to use when communicating can be very important. And I don't know, I once was told by one of my leaders that, hey, do you realize some of the words that you say sometimes? And I thought, yes. The truth was I didn't, and there were things I was saying that I didn't realize. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of things I want you to think about. So I want you to think about not using the word why. So as an example, if an employee comes into work late one day and the first thing you say to them is, why are you late? The chances are you're going to put their back up ever so slightly. Because just by saying that statement in that way may in fact say to them, guilty until proven innocent. And so when I first heard this, I got this when I was doing a coaching program, I thought, and then I tested it on a coaching client and I used the word why and didn't even realize I had used it. And right away, she took offense to what I had said. I know for sure this works. So let's give it an example. So if you took why out of the equation and you replaced it with what or how, let's go back to the example of an employee comes in late for work. So instead of saying, why were you late? If you replaced it with what or how, you're forced to reframe it. So, Sally, what happened? You're late for work. All of a sudden, that opens up the opportunity for Sally or Joe to say, oh, here's what happened. If you start with why, you generally shut the conversation down quite quickly. So something simple, please keep why out of your conversation and replace it with what or how. I can tell you it took me a little bit to get used to it because it was something that I said all the time. But once you practice it a little bit, you'll find that your communication, just by taking the why out, replacing with what or how, will increase in interactions with your staff, amazingly so. The other thing is to seek first to understand and not to be understood. You know, when you're asking that why question about why someone's late, we're not seeking first to understand. We're really just saying you're late, and we're not really going to give you an opportunity to tell us otherwise. If you come at conversations with your team seeking first to understand, then to be understood, the chances are you'll make it a safe place for them to tell you whatever it is they need to tell you. So if they're late for work and there's something they want to share, you want to make sure it's safe enough for them to do so. So as dear old Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Another little tip is ask, don't tell. As managers, I think over time we were raised or taught that we are supposed to have all the answers to everything. And the truth is we can't possibly have them. But I know that employees do. So for example, I was working with a client and he was on a job site and he needed some temporary steps built to get up into the trailer that they were doing some work in or work out of. And so he asked one of his carpenters to go do it. So his carpenter went and did it and didn't use a cut sheet. And so he got completely upset with the manager or the employee for not using a cut sheet. And so I talked about that and I said, well, how could you have gone about that differently? So instead of telling him you have to use a cut sheet, ask him, what would it look like had he have used a cut sheet? How would that impact the lumber that was used? How much faster would he do his job? And what would it look like when it was done? So asking and not telling allows me, the employee, the opportunity to kind of figure it out for myself. It takes a little bit longer, but I can promise you if you give me the opportunity to kind of think it through myself, I'm going to realize that it makes more sense if I'm going to do a temporary stairwell to figure out exactly how much lumber I need, to cut it to spec so that I'm not wasting wood. But if you just tell me to do it and not give me that opportunity, I'm not as likely to do as well. So I think important for powerful communication is to not use why, to use what or how, and give me an opportunity to think it through. Ask me good questions so that I can in part figure it out myself. The other thing is listening. I don't know, I believe that if listening were a muscle, it would in many ways be the weakest one in our bodies. So I'm asking you to just stop for a minute and think about it. Think about how well you listen to your employees. If they're coming to talk to you and you're busy on your phone, or you're looking at your watch or on your computer, the likelihood that you're really listening to them is slim. And I know that as an employee, if I came to talk to you, I would just want to be heard. So make sure that when you're meeting with employees that you are giving them the time they need. Listening is a critical component to communication. So now let's talk about managing time and stress. So I believe the root of all conflict is unmet expectations, and that can be super frustrating. So if you're not clear with an employee what you need from them, if you haven't established together that maybe a cut sheet is the right approach, I'm going to guess that your expectations aren't going to get met and you're going to get frustrated. And when you get frustrated, you're going to show up in a way that isn't going to give you the best reaction, I would say, from employees. So it all starts here. System, training, manager, employee. So if I'm upset with an employee because they haven't done something that I wanted them to do in the way that I wanted to do it, you have to ask yourself, is there a system in place? Is there a system in place that says, in order to do this, this is how I'm supposed to do it? Has the employee been trained on it? And is the manager holding them accountable? So if all those three is yes, then you might have a challenge with your employee. If any of the answers above are no, then you need to go back and look. We need to put a system in place, we need to train them on it, and then me as the manager have to make sure I hold employees accountable. When you do that, you're not going to have unmet expectations because everybody's going to be really clear on what's expected of them because there's a system in place and they've been trained on it and you're holding them accountable for it. Another thing to think about when you're having meetings with employees and you're talking about things looking a different way or you're hoping that they'll do something differently is sustainable change occurs when an employee is building something, not fixing something. So if you come to me and you're trying to fix something I did, I'm not going to be as open to learning as if you're trying to build something. So if you're trying to build my career by teaching me something, that if I knew that if I did it better or differently, it would build me. It would help me be better at who I was and the way that I did things. Not so much who I was, but better at what I was doing and the way that I was doing it. I'd be way more open to hearing what you had to say and trying something new. So again, don't try and fix me, try and build me. Try and help me be the best I can be by helping me understand that if I learned it a different way or tried it a different way, what a different result I could achieve. The other thing to think about, manager, leader, is what you tolerate, you manage. So if you've got turnover, low productivity, you've got mistakes happening, you got low morale, people aren't showing up for work, or worse, people are at work, but they're not really there mentally. They've got issues with coworkers. If you let all that go on and you're tolerating it, you're going to manage it. And boy, are you going to manage it. So managing time and stress is about dealing with those things and not thinking of them as necessarily conflict, but opportunities to grow and learn. And so one thing I know is that people possess the ability to resolve their own upsets, do their own thinking, and discover their own answers and path forward, if you allow them the time to do that. And again, I know that everybody's busy and there's a lot going on, but if you can invest in employees like me early on, and you spend a little bit more time with me, I promise they'll be amazing longer term down the road. So some questioning tips that you could use is share intentions up front. Set the context for the question rather than dropping it on your employees. So if you want to talk to them about the way that they've done something, tell them that you want to do that. You want to have a conversation about a job that they just worked on or a project that they just completed and see if it's a good time for them. Let them know that what you want to do is try and support their career because you know that they have career aspirations of X. Never do for them what they can do for themselves. The minute a manager starts doing work for an employee that an employee should be doing, you got to know that you kind of get yourself in trouble a little bit there. So never do for others what they can do for themselves. And the manager coach functions as a guide and sounding board who is proactive rather than reactive, which demonstrates a willingness to work together. So be proactive, don't be reactive. Some sample questions that you could ask is, what's important to you about this situation? What outcome would you like to produce? How may I support you today? How would you feel if you accomplished this goal? Like if you're trying to teach them something different and they knew that if they achieved it, they had met a goal of theirs, what would that be? Again, help me think about if I did this, how it's going to impact me. What are they proud of? What would give them the greatest joy? And you know, every employee that I've ever talked to, they want to do good work. They want to do the best work they know how. So help show them how to do that. How will this action you were promising make a difference? What's the easiest action to take? These are just a few questions, but notice each one of them, if you didn't notice, you can see it on the paper, is what or how is the first word of every sentence. There's no why in there. It's only about what can you do, how can you help, what do they need, how can they do it differently to get a better result. You know, Disney conducts manager surveys every year, and they know that the destinations with the lower manager ratings will have revenue issues. And so thus they focus on working with those managers to overcome the challenges. There's a direct correlation for them that if managers are getting poor ratings, they know revenue will go down. And so that just shows the impact that managers and leaders have on the employee group. I just thought that was a really interesting stat and something that if you're a manager, leader, or owner, have complete control over. So in summary, effective communication is critical. Stay even-keeled. The words you use matter. Listen with intent. Remember that systems training manager and employee in those orders are going to manage expectations so that there aren't going to be any unmet expectations. You know, one of the things I always say is when you first meet an employee and you sit down and you're working with each other for the first time, ask them, what is it that they need from you to be successful? What do they expect from you and what do you expect from them? Have those open, honest dialogue. Hopefully your organization has behavioral values that you can talk about, because man, if you've got that set up, if you've got that, the whole idea of the why you exist, your values set up, it allows you as a manager and employee to have really open, powerful dialogue about how they're doing, how successful they are at following them, and maybe the areas that they're not following them as well. And coaching without action is merely a conversation. So I have an assignment for you. To whom have you avoided giving feedback? And what do you need to say to that person, and when will you do that? Because if we're going to expect our employees to do, grow and learn and build, we got to expect the same of ourselves. So if there's somebody that you haven't given feedback to and you need to, go do it. And hopefully it's not just negative feedback. Hopefully you've got some really powerful feedback because they've done a really great job. Just make sure whatever feedback you give, you're very specific about it as far as what you say. Don't just say attaboy and not say why. Or don't say great job without saying why. Because you might find that they think what was great is not the same thing as you think that was great. This has been an initiative of the City of Penticton's Economic Development Department. And I'm Corey Meadell from the Jody Performance Group.